I would say that the security threat to the Olympics, this particular Olympics, are the greatest I think I've ever seen because of the proximity of the terrorist to the Olympic Village.
All right, Mike McCall now, House Homeland Security Committee Chair, raising the alarm over security yet again for Americans at the Winter Games, saying that the head of Al-Qaeda is reportedly calling for a global jihad against the Games. Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor, and sir, good afternoon to you. There's a lot to get to on this. There was a question that came up over the weekend about canceling the Games. Do you buy into that at all?
Well, I don't buy into canceling the Games yet, but I must say I find it hard to understand why spectators would want to go into this situation. The Russian claims of having a ring of steel around the Games are not surprising, but the terrorists know what the odds are, and I think while you can protect some Olympic venues, you can make them very hard. It just means that other locations are more vulnerable.
Well, this is true, and one of your big concerns is that if there is someone who's willing to do harm, they might already be there. And the Russians are thinking that same way, too. And there's no way to know until next Friday when the opening games hit, the opening ceremonies.
Right. A lot of these people could be there working in hotels or restaurants or even assisting the Games themselves. And, you know, it's not just the threat of suicide bombers or planted explosives like the attack at the train station in a nearby Russian city that we've seen so much of. Remember, these same terrorists over the years have conducted mass hostage takings at Beslan, the school, in 2004. The seizure of the theater in Moscow where the play Nordost was playing in 2002, where because both of the hostages and the Russian response, literally hundreds of the hostages themselves were killed. So we've been through this before, unfortunately.
And they are aggressive, too, and I know that's something that concerns you. Have you thought about the athletes themselves? There's thousands of people coming from all over the world. You don't know their backgrounds. You know, you have to think that that is a factor in security as well, is it not?
Well, and we know that the State Department is already concerned about security, issuing this kind of incredible directive to the U.S. team that if they go out of the Olympic venues, not to wear their American uniforms. I think the athletes themselves obviously would be tremendously disappointed if the Games were canceled. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I'm very worried, as a number of people have indicated, we do not have adequate intelligence from the Russians. They're not sharing with us what they know in full. And I think in this kind of circumstance where you've picked an Olympic venue that, as Congressman McCall said, is right near the terrorist neighborhood, this is particularly disturbing.
We're going to have Mike McCall in America's Newsroom tomorrow morning. More on that. There's another topic that is out today, sir, that I want to get you to respond to. Hillary Clinton was speaking at a convention earlier today, on Monday, today, in New Orleans. And she was asked about some regrets, and she talked about Benghazi, frankly. And part of what she said is, would you have any do-overs, rather? Oh, sure. Quote, my biggest, regret is what happened in Benghazi. It was a terrible tragedy. Losing 4 Americans, 2 diplomats, and now it's public, so I can say 2 CIA operatives. She talked like that before?
Well, you know, I think she said that before, but there's more than regret here. It was a tragedy. There's obviously the human emotion, but fundamentally, Benghazi represented a dramatic policy failure of the, I guess we can say this, the Obama-Clinton policy on terrorism. And I think that's the issue, the mistakes that were made before the attack, mistakes made on the day of the attack itself, and the failure to learn the lesson of Benghazi in the year and a half since then. So it's appropriate that she expresses regret, but this issue isn't going to go away.
Well, just respond to this too then, okay? Because she talked about you make choices, these are her words now, based on imperfect information, and you make them, as we say, to the best of your ability. And she went on to say, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be unforeseen consequences, unpredictable twists and turns. What do you think of that?
It wasn't just information that they were unaware of. I think the administration as a whole was ignoring the growth of the terrorist threat in Libya as a whole. They didn't want to admit that the war on terror was in fact not only not over, but was growing more acute. And they flew in the face of information about terrorist threats in Benghazi in particular that had accumulated over a year and that was well known to our personnel in Libya, both in Tripoli and Benghazi. So it was not something that was unexpected. I think that that their policy led directly to this tragedy, unfortunately.
Well, okay. Thank you, sir. John Bolton there, Mr. Ambassador. Appreciate your time today. Again, those comments from New Orleans a few hours earlier. Thank you, sir. We'll talk again.
All right, well, the White House declaring that making Obamacare a reality is worth any political cost. But do Democratic lawmakers feel the same way in this big election year? We'll debate that. Also